Welcome to our deep dive into the Dead Sea Scrolls. Imagine unearthing a hidden library packed with ancient texts that offer a glimpse into a lost world of Jewish history and spirituality. That's exactly what happened in 1947.
It's incredible to think that these scrolls just sat hidden for centuries.
Right.
Only to emerge and completely reshape our understanding of the Second Temple period.
Like a time capsule.
A pivotal era that spanned roughly from the 6th century BC to the 1st century AD.
It's like having a direct line to a period filled with change and upheaval.
Absolutely.
Right. The time of figures like Herod the Great and the Roman occupation. We're going to explore excerpts from the complete Dead Sea Scrolls, along with historical and academic analysis to try and decode it all.
The Dead Sea Scrolls have become a cornerstone of research into this era.
Yeah.
They reveal so much about the beliefs and practices of a Jewish sect.
Okay.
Most likely the Essenes who authored many of these scrolls.
Right.
We'll examine their daily lives,
Yeah.
their interpretations of Jewish law, and how they differed from mainstream Judaism.
And I can't wait to get to the intrigue surrounding their discovery.
No.
The scrolls weren't made public immediately,
Right.
and the delay fueled all sorts of speculation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The theories ranged from secret societies to government cover-ups,
Oh, wow.
capturing the imaginations of scholars and the public alike.
So fascinating.
While the most probable explanation points to the Essenes,
Oh, okay.
based on the scroll's contents and historical accounts, like those of Josephus' alternative viewpoints, still exist.
So it's not a completely closed case.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Some scholars propose links to the Pharisees, Sadducees, or even early Christians.
Interesting.
Reconciling the scrolls with accounts from other sources is complex
I bet.
and has sparked lively debate.
Healthy academic disagreement.
Right.
But for our deep dive, let's focus on what we can glean about the Essene community through these scrolls. What makes them so unique?
Imagine a community deeply devoted to purity and holiness. Structured with a strict hierarchy, priests played a prominent role overseeing nearly every aspect of life.
Right.
They believed in a covenant with God, a sacred pact, and held a ritual renewal of this covenant,
Interesting.
demonstrating their dedication to a life set apart.
So a community with a very strong sense of identity.
Yes,
How did their daily life reflect that?
their interpretations of Jewish law were quite distinct.
Okay.
For instance, their practices around ritual baths and temple worship were unique.
Interesting.
The scrolls even delve into specifics, revealing just how meticulously they adhered to their belief.
That's a level of detail that really brings their world to life.
Right.
And it likely contributed to the tensions that existed between them and other Jewish groups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the most striking differences lies in their messianic beliefs.
Okay.
The Essenes believe not in one, but two messiahs.
Wait, two messiahs?
Yes.
Wow.
One a priestly messiah descended from Aaron,
Okay.
and the other a royal messiah from the line of David.
That's a fascinating twist on traditional messianic expectations.
It is.
Yeah.
What's even more intriguing is their belief that the priestly messiah would hold authority over the Davidic messiah.
That's fascinating.
This really highlights the centrality of the priesthood in their community.
So their view of the Messiah wasn't just about a single figure,
Right.
but about a dynamic between two figures embodying different aspects of leadership.
Yes.
Were there other key beliefs that set them apart?
Remember, this was an era of intense anticipation.
Okay.
The Essenes, like many, were looking for signs of the end times,
Yeah.
a final war between good and evil.
So they weren't just passively waiting, but actively preparing?
Precisely.
Okay.
The scrolls provide a window into those preparations.
So what can we see?
We see battle plans, descriptions of weapons and formations, even prayers and rituals for spiritual protection.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about these apocalyptic texts and the world they envisioned?
One of the most famous scrolls is the War Scroll. It lays out their plan for the final battle against the forces of darkness, whom they called the Kittim, likely referring to the Romans who ruled over them.
So we can see how their historical context living under Roman rule might have shaped their apocalyptic expectations?
Absolutely.
Right.
But these texts went beyond just physical battles.
Okay.
They were filled with symbolic language, drawing upon biblical imagery and prophecies.
So for them, it wasn't just winning a war, but fulfilling a divinely ordained plan.
Exactly.
Wow.
They believed they were the true Israel,
Okay.
chosen to fight for God's cause in the end times.
Right.
This conviction fueled their writings with passion and intensity.
It's remarkable how these scrolls can transport us back to their time and place,
It is?
giving us a sense of what it was like to live with such fervent anticipation.
Yeah.
What are some of the more fascinating details we find?
There's so many.
Right.
The Hymns of the Sage, for instance, lists various demonic figures, including Lilith.
Lilith. Now that's a name with some serious mystique.
It certainly is. It highlights how their worldview encompassed both the earthly and the supernatural.
Interesting.
They weren't just focused on the practicalities of daily life,
Right.
but also on the unseen forces at play.
What else caught your eye?
Well, there's the Copper Scroll, which reads like a cryptic treasure map.
Oh, wow.
It lists locations of hidden gold and silver.
A real-life treasure hunt. Amazing.
Scholars debate whether it refers to literal treasures or holds a more symbolic meaning.
Right.
And then there's the Testament of Levi, recounting Levi's prophetic vision and hinting at the coming of a future king.
Okay.
These texts woven together create a rich tapestry of their worldview and their hopes for the future.
It's incredible to have access to these beliefs, their hopes and fears through these ancient documents.
It speaks to the enduring power of the written word to bridge the gap between centuries and connect us to those who came before us.
So we've talked about the Essenes and their beliefs, but how do these scrolls connect to the Bible itself?
That's a crucial question. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain copies of almost every book of the Hebrew Bible,
Oh.
offering valuable insights into textual variations in early interpretations.
So they weren't just writing their own texts, they were actively engaging with the scriptures that are familiar to us today.
Exactly.
Okay.
And their interpretations could be quite unique.
Right.
For example, they saw themselves as fulfilling certain biblical prophecies, drawing parallels between their community and figures like Moses and Joshua leading the Israelites.
That makes sense, given their belief that they were the true Israel.
Hmm.
It's like they saw their own story as an extension of the biblical narrative.
Yes,
Okay.
they believed they were living in the final act of God's plan.
Wow.
Their commentaries on biblical figures and events often reflect this apocalyptic worldview.
It's amazing how the scrolls can shed new light on familiar stories from the Bible,
It is.
giving us fresh perspectives on events we might think we already know.
It's like having a conversation across time, gaining insights from a community that lived and breathed these texts in a way we can only imagine.
This is what I love. It's like peeling back layers of history and uncovering these hidden connections.
And it's what makes the Dead Sea Scrolls so compelling.
Yeah.
They offer us a window into a lost world, challenging us to re-examine our own understanding of the Bible and the history of Judaism.
Well said.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, let's take a moment to consider the bigger picture.
Okay.
What do these scrolls tell us about the diversity of Jewish thought during this period?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The Dead Sea Scrolls completely shatter any notion of a single monolithic Judaism in the Second Temple period.
Right.
They reveal a spectrum of beliefs and practices, highlighting the dynamism and complexity of this era.
So it wasn't just one uniform way of being Jewish.
Not at all.
Right.
And I think that's a valuable lesson for us today as well.
How so?
These scrolls remind us of the importance of embracing diverse perspectives and recognizing that even within a single faith, there can be a multitude of interpretations and ways of living.
That's a powerful message, encouraging us to question assumptions and engage in dialogue, even when faced with viewpoints that might challenge our own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of studying history. It pushes us to expand our understanding and grapple with the nuances of the past.
It's incredible how these ancient scrolls can still speak to us today, offering timeless insights into the human condition and the search for meaning.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Dead Sea Scrolls continue to fascinate scholars and inspire further exploration. We talked about the Essenes and their distinctive beliefs. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty and explore some specific scrolls.
Okay.
Where do we start?
Let's start with the Community Rule, a fascinating text.
Okay.
It reads like a constitution for the Essene community.
Interesting.
It outlines their structure, their
Yeah.
core beliefs, and even their daily practices.
So if we want to understand how they organize their lives,
Yes.
this is the text to look at.
Precisely.
The Community Rule reveals a community built on shared values and a deep commitment to discipline.
Like what kinds of things?
For example, new members had to swear a binding oath
Wow.
to uphold the law of Moses.
That's serious. They clearly didn't take their commitment lightly.
No.
Were there consequences for those who broke the rules?
The Community Rule lays out a range of penalties,
Okay.
including expulsion from the community.
So like being shunned.
Yeah, they believed that maintaining purity and order within their group was paramount.
It sounds like they had a clear vision of what it meant to be a member of their community.
Mm-hmm.
What about specific rituals or practices described in the community rule? Anything that particularly stands out to you?
One that captures the essence of their beliefs is the ritual for the renewal of the covenant.
Okay.
It was a ceremony filled with symbolism involving blessings, curses, and a communal reaffirmation of their dedication to God's laws.
It sounds like a powerful way to reinforce their identity and strengthen their bonds as a community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a way for them to distinguish themselves from what they perceived as the corruption of the outside world.
Right.
And to rededicate themselves to their unique path.
It's remarkable how these scrolls give us such a vivid picture of a community that existed over 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We can almost feel their presence.
It's truly captivating, and the scrolls don't just describe grand ceremonies.
Okay.
They also offer glimpses into the Essenes' everyday routines.
Like what?
They had designated times for study,
Oh,
for
wait.
prayer, and for communal meals.
Right, a structured life with discipline and order woven into its fabric.
Exactly.
It almost sounds monastic with its emphasis on routine and spiritual practice.
The parallels are definitely there.
Right.
Simplicity, self-control,
Yeah.
and a focus on spiritual growth were all central to their way of life.
Speaking of spiritual growth, we can't forget about the hymns of thanksgiving.
Right.
What can we learn from those texts?
The hymns are beautiful.
Okay.
They're full of poetic imagery and offer a window into the Essenes' personal relationship with God.
Okay.
We see expressions of gratitude,
Yeah.
acknowledgments of their struggles,
Right.
and a deep yearning for spiritual enlightenment.
So these texts move beyond the strictness of rules and regulations and reveal a more personal, heartfelt connection to the divine.
Precisely.
Okay.
We see humility,
Yeah.
a recognition of their own human frailty,
Right.
and a profound awe in the face of God's power.
It's a good reminder that even in a community known for its strictness,
Yeah.
there was also room for personal faith and introspection.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the language itself is moving.
What do you mean?
They speak of God's mercy, his guidance, and his unwavering love for his chosen people.
It's amazing how poetry can express emotions and beliefs
Yes.
that might be difficult to articulate otherwise.
Yeah.
Reading these texts is like gaining a deeper understanding of their inner lives.
I agree.
Yeah.
These hymns, though, written centuries ago, still resonate with us today.
In what way?
Their search for meaning and connection is something we can all relate to.
Now, we've talked about the community rule and the hymns of thanksgiving, but I'm also curious to learn more about those apocalyptic texts we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about the War Scroll and what it reveals about their worldview?
The War Scroll is a fascinating text.
Okay.
Remember how we discussed the Essenes' belief in a final battle between good and evil?
Yeah.
Well, this scroll is essentially their playbook for that conflict.
So this wasn't just some abstract idea.
No.
They had a concrete plan for how they believed this war would unfold.
Exactly.
Ah.
And it's remarkable how they blended military strategy
Okay.
with spiritual language and imagery.
Like what?
For instance, they believed angels would fight alongside them against the forces of darkness.
Wow. That's quite a vision.
It is.
It's like a fusion of biblical prophecy and ancient warfare.
It is. And it speaks to their deep conviction that they were participating in a cosmic battle, a struggle that would determine the fate of the world. Their dedication to their beliefs was truly unwavering.
Their attention to detail is fascinating.
Right.
They even describe specific weapons and formations, possibly drawing on Roman military tactics, which, as we mentioned, might reflect their own experiences living under Roman rule.
Right.
It's a reminder that these texts were written within a specific historical and political context, and those influences are woven into their narratives. It's like piecing together a puzzle, seeing how their beliefs, their historical circumstances, and their interpretations of biblical prophecy all intercept and inform these texts.
Precisely.
And that's one of the most rewarding aspects of studying the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
It's a constant process of discovery and uncovering new layers of meaning.
I agree.
Speaking of connecting the dots, I'm curious about those connections to biblical figures and events. How did the Essenes see themselves fitting into the grand narrative of Jewish history?
They believed they were living in a time of great significance, a time that would usher in the Messianic age.
Right.
And they saw themselves as the true heirs to the covenant, the faithful remnant chosen by God to fulfill his will.
So they weren't just passively studying the Bible.
No.
They were actively trying to live it out, seeing their own community as a continuation of that sacred story.
Exactly.
Okay.
They drew parallels between their own experiences and those of figures like Moses, Joshua, and David.
Right.
Their exile in the desert, for instance, was seen as a parallel to the Israelites' wanderings after the Exodus.
That's a powerful image. It reinforces their sense of being chosen, of following in the footsteps of their ancestors.
Yes.
Yeah.
And their commentaries on biblical texts often reflect this sense of continuity.
Okay.
They were interpreting the past to understand their present and anticipate the future.
It's fascinating how they were able to weave together biblical prophecy, historical events, and their own lived experiences into a coherent worldview.
It speaks volumes about their profound faith.
Right.
And their unwavering belief in God's plan. They saw themselves as playing a pivotal role in the unfolding of that plan.
So far, we've explored the community rule, the hymns of thanksgiving, and the war scroll.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we can learn from these documents about the beliefs, practices, and worldview of the Essene community.
It really is. And it's important to remember that these are just a few examples.
Right.
Hundreds of scrolls were discovered.
Yeah.
Each offering unique insights into the world of Second Temple Judaism.
It's like having access to a vast library, each scroll a portal to a different aspect of their lives and beliefs.
Exactly.
What other treasures can we find in this library?
Well, one of the most fascinating aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls is the diversity of genres they represent.
Oh,
Alongside the religious texts,
yeah.
we also find historical narratives, legal documents,
Yeah.
wisdom literature,
Okay.
even poetry and hymns.
So it wasn't all about strict religious observance.
Right.
They clearly had a rich literary tradition that encompassed a range of interests.
They did. And it's worth noting that these texts weren't just for a scholarly elite.
Okay.
Some were likely meant for communal reading or instruction, suggesting a desire to share their knowledge and beliefs with a wider audience within their community.
It makes me think about the scribes who meticulously copied these scrolls. They must have played a crucial role in preserving and transmitting their teachings.
Absolutely. Scribes were highly respected figures.
Okay.
They weren't just copyists. They were guardians of knowledge, ensuring that the Essene's teachings would be passed on to future generations.
It's incredible to think about the dedication that went into creating these scrolls, especially in a time long before printing presses.
Right. It really underscores the importance they placed on the written word as a vehicle for spiritual and intellectual growth.
Yeah.
They clearly believed that these texts held immense power.
We've touched on the different types of texts, but can you give us some specific examples that illustrate the range of topics they covered?
One area that stands out is their exploration of Jewish law.
Okay.
Some scrolls delve into the intricacies of biblical commandments and rituals, offering detailed interpretations and commentary.
So we can see how they were engaging with the same questions of religious observance that were being debated in other Jewish circles at the time.
Exactly.
Right.
But their interpretations often took a stricter approach,
Okay.
reflecting their emphasis on purity and separation from what they saw as corrupting influences. They were creating their own distinct path within the broader landscape of Judaism.
It's like they were crafting a blueprint for a life lived in accordance with God's will as they understood it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And these legal texts are fascinating windows into their unique approach to Jewish law and how they sought to apply it to their daily lives.
What other topics did they write about?
We also find texts that offer wisdom teachings, proverbs, and reflections on the human condition.
Okay.
These writings often echo themes found in biblical wisdom literature, but with a distinct Essene perspective.
So their concerns weren't solely focused on the afterlife.
Right.
They were also seeking guidance on how to live a meaningful life in the present.
Yes.
Okay.
Their texts emphasize virtues like humility,
Yeah.
justice, and compassion qualities they believed were essential for spiritual growth.
It's fascinating to see how these universal values find expression within a specific religious and cultural context.
It speaks to the enduring power of these values and their relevance across time and cultures.
We've talked about legal texts and wisdom literature, but what about those historical narratives you mentioned earlier?
Right.
What kinds of stories did they tell?
These narratives are particularly intriguing because they often provide alternative interpretations of biblical stories,
Okay.
or even offer glimpses into events not recorded in the Bible.
So they weren't just passively accepting traditional biblical narratives.
Yeah.
They were actively reinterpreting them and even creating their own stories to supplement the existing scriptures.
Exactly.
Wow.
And their narratives often reflect their own worldview and beliefs.
Right.
They offer a lens through which we can see how they understood God's actions in history and their own place within that grand narrative.
It's incredible how these scrolls can challenge our assumptions about the past,
Yeah.
providing new perspectives on events we might think we already know.
It reminds us that history is rarely a straightforward story.
Right.
It's a tapestry woven from multiple perspectives, and the Dead Sea Scrolls provide a crucial thread, allowing us to see that tapestry with fresh eyes.
And they give us a glimpse into a world that might have otherwise been lost to time.
Exactly.
Right.
These scrolls are more than just ancient artifacts. They're living documents filled with voices from the past that continue to speak to us today, inviting us to engage with their stories and grapple with their enduring significance. It's time to consider the broader significance of these discoveries. We've got these ancient Jewish texts that could potentially give us some insight into the world of early Christianity.
Right.
But why should a Latter-day Saint care? Like, what makes the Dead Sea Scrolls relevant to Mormonism specifically?
That's a great question. The reason I think Latter-day Saints should care is that the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal a community that was really obsessed with things like covenant,
Okay.
priesthood,
Yeah.
and living a life that was aligned with God's law. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those are like central themes to Mormonism as well.
Right. So we start to see some common threads
Okay.
right away. And what's even more interesting is that the people who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, they saw themselves as the true Israel,
Okay.
upholding the authentic traditions of Judaism in a time when they felt like everything had become corrupted.
Okay.
And so that idea of restoring
Yeah.
the true way, of a pure way of living, really resonates, I think, with the Latter-day Saint emphasis on restoration.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating parallel. I mean, it's not just that both traditions value these concepts,
Yeah.
but like you said, there's that shared sense of reclassing something
Absolutely.
that has been lost.
Trying to get back to this pristine, original form of the faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you find in Mormonism as well.
Okay, so we're talking about these broad themes.
Right.
Covenant, priesthood, restoration, that seem to resonate with both traditions.
Yes.
But what about some of the more specific details? Are there any practices or beliefs described in the Dead Sea Scrolls that might seem familiar to a Latter-day Saint?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look closer, we find some really fascinating connections in the details. For example, the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about how the Essenes practiced ritual bathing twice a day.
Okay.
It was essential for them to maintain purity.
Wow, okay, so that immediately makes me think of temple ceremonies.
Exactly.
The endowment.
Yeah. With the washing and the symbolism related to spiritual cleansing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's a very striking similarity, and that's not the only one. The scrolls also describe these communal meals
Okay.
that were presided over by a priestly figure. And these meals were imbued with spiritual significance,
Oh, wow.
which, kind of evokes the Latter-day Saint practice of the sacrament.
Right, yeah. Where, bread and water
Right.
are blessed and passed
Yeah.
and shares.
It's like we're seeing this reflection or like this distant echo
right.
of ancient practices in modern Mormon rituals.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's any sort of historical thread or connection there that we just haven't fully uncovered yet.
It really does. And I think that sense of connection becomes even stronger when we start to look at the way that the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about messianic figures.
Okay.
And this is where I think things get particularly interesting for Latter-day Saints.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's so unique about their understanding of the Messiah?
Well, unlike traditional Christianity, which tends to focus on the idea of a single Messiah,
Okay.
the Dead Sea Scrolls actually mention two Messiahs. They talk about a priest Messiah
Okay.
and a king Messiah.
So how do these two messianic concepts relate to each other? And
Uh,
how might that compare to LDS beliefs?
Right. That's one of the reasons why I think studying the Dead Sea Scrolls is so valuable,
Okay.
because it forces us to kind of re-examine our own assumptions
Yeah.
about what we believe.
So we're not just looking at historical curiosities here.
No,
We're potentially uncovering insights that could actually deepen our understanding of LDS doctrine.
absolutely.
This is way more than I expected when we
Yeah.
started this conversation.
There is so much more to explore
Oh, wow.
in terms of how the Dead Sea Scrolls can shed light on themes like prophecy,
Right.
scriptural interpretation,
Yeah.
and this whole concept of a chosen people.
Okay. These scrolls provide us with a unique window into the Second Temple period, a pivotal era in Jewish history that had a profound impact on the development of both Judaism and Christianity.
So by understanding this period better,
Yeah.
we gain a deeper understanding of the roots of these two major world religions.
Exactly.
Okay.
The scrolls illuminate the diverse beliefs and practices that existed within Judaism at that time,
Right.
challenging any notion of a single uniform faith.
And as we discussed earlier, that diversity is a valuable lesson for us today.
Absolutely.
It encourages tolerance, understanding, and a willingness to engage with perspectives that differ from our own.
Precisely. The scrolls also offer valuable insights into the development of early Christian thought.
Oh, interesting.
Scholars have noted some interesting parallels between Essene beliefs and those of early Christians, particularly in areas like communal living, ritual purity, and messianic expectations.
So it's not about proving a direct link,
Right.
but about understanding the broader context.
Right. The scrolls add another layer to the historical puzzle, reminding us that both Judaism and Christianity emerged from a complex and dynamic historical milieu.
Beyond their historical significance, are there any lessons we can draw from the Dead Sea Scrolls for our own lives today?
I think there are many.
Like what?
The Essenes' unwavering commitment to their beliefs
Okay.
and their willingness to live apart from mainstream society
Yeah.
can inspire us to reflect on our own values and the choices we make.
It's a powerful reminder that standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult, can be a catalyst for change.
Absolutely. The Essenes' emphasis on community, on shared rituals and practices,
Right.
can also speak to our own longing for connection and belonging.
In a world that often feels isolating, it highlights the importance of finding those spaces where we feel seen and understood.
Yeah.
Whether it's a community based on shared interests, beliefs, or simply a desire for deeper connection, those bonds are essential.
We all need those spaces,
Yeah.
those communities that nurture our sense of belonging. And finally, I think the Essenes' dedication to spiritual growth, their pursuit of wisdom and understanding,
Right.
can inspire us to cultivate our own inner lives.
In a world that often prioritizes the material over the spirituals, the scrolls remind us of the importance of seeking meaning, purpose, and a connection to something larger than ourselves.
Beautifully put, it's a timeless pursuit regardless of our individual beliefs or backgrounds.
It's truly remarkable how these ancient texts can offer such profound and relevant wisdom for us today.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are a gift, a glimpse into a lost world that challenges us to re-examine our own beliefs, values, and aspirations.
And as we conclude our deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder. Imagine just for a moment that you were a member of the Essene community.
Okay.
What role would you play? What texts would resonate most strongly with you? And how would you apply their teachings to your own life?
That's a wonderful question. It invites us to step outside our own time and place, to walk in the footsteps of those who came before us, and to consider how their experiences might illuminate our own.
Perhaps in doing so, we might discover something new about ourselves, about the world, and about the enduring power of the human spirit to seek meaning and connection.
Well said. It's time for us to emerge from the caves, carrying with us the wisdom and insights gleaned from our deep dive into the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those hidden treasures that lie buried within history and within yourselves.